The title of our panel is going to be Political Power in the Digital Age. I'm Péter Krekó, Director of Political Capital Institute, a think tank based in Budapest that is dealing a lot with disinformation and Russian sharp power influence in Central Eastern Europe. Also, I'm an external fellow at the Institute of Human Sciences in Vienna. And we will have a very good panel of practitioners who are dealing from very different angles on rather with the positive aspects of the digital era and technology. So this panel will not be about painting another apocalyptic vision on in what ways technology will kill our future. We would like much more to focus in this panel on what technology can help us in the future to make our future brighter. So it's really a very grateful task to make a panel right after the lunch break. So hope everyone drank enough coffee to keep awake. And also we discussed it with our esteemed panelists that we will try to make it a real dialogue instead of a set of monologues to keep you awake. So first I will introduce the panelists, then we'll have some introductory remarks to set the stage. Then comes the discussion, and then everyone can raise their questions to the panelists. So we have a diverse panel of 4 esteemed speakers with quite different backgrounds. First, on your far left, you can see Mr. Tuan, Nguyen, who is the co-founder and chief executive officer of the Boston Global Forum. He's co-founder and director of Michael Dukakis Institute for Leadership and Innovation and co-founder and CEO of the Boston Global Forum. For his AI World Society initiative and the concepts of AI government he developed, the Vietnam National Television named him the Person of the Year 2018. He served on the Harvard Business School Global Advisory Board from 2008 to 2016. To his right, meet Mr. André Loesekrug-Pietri, who is the director of J.E.D.I. So we have a real Jedi here in the room to make the panel even more vibrant and interesting, full of action. And J.E.D.I is the Joint European Disruptive Initiative, and he is the initiator, a director of this project aiming to accelerate Europe's leadership in disruptive innovations. He is also a private pilot and colonel with the French Air Force People's Reserve, so he will drive us through the turbulent airs of disinformation and other fields. And in 2017, he became special advisor to the French Minister of Defense, responsible in particular for European defense policy, as well as technology and innovation. To his right, you can meet with Mr. John Frank, who received his degree from Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs and Princeton University and Columbia Law School. Frank is Microsoft's vice president responsible for EU governmental affairs. He works for Microsoft for 25 years, and right now he leads Microsoft's government affairs team in Brussels and European national capitals on EU issues. And to my right, please meet Ms. Dagnija Lejiņa, who had her MSc in Politics and Communication from London School of Economics and Political Science. She's a communication professional with a special interest in technology, startups, and community engagement. In addition to creating the Digital Freedom Festival, she is the co-founder of a reputation management company called Lejiņa and Slayers, and she is a co-founder of Riga Ventures Summit. And she also has some political experience because she served as a press secretary, as communicators advisor to the Latvian foreign minister. So first, a few introductory remarks. The real question of this panel is going to be who owns the political power in the digital age. If we think back a few decades, then there was this highly optimistic vision that internet and then social media will make the world better for the citizens. And finally, citizens will be the ones who really own the political power, in the sense that internet and then social media creates horizontal power relations instead of the vertical ones, can make everyone an opinion leader, can make everyone an agenda setter, can make politics more transparent and more accountable. And even if you think back to the Arab Spring in 2011 or the Gezi Park protest in 2013, there was this highly optimistic expectation towards social media in particular, but generally about the info communication technologies, that it will really help to democratize the world, and it will be the magic wand of democrats against the autocrats. Right now, I think we have quite different visions on how the digital age and technology can change our future and the world that we live in. After the Brexit referendum, the US presidential elections, hybrid wars in Crimea, massive disinformation campaigns run by Russia, China, and others, not to talk about social media-fueled mob lynchings in India and elsewhere. The general mood right now is that social media is rather a danger in a lot of cases than a real opportunity. And also the optimism that info communication tools are helping the better informed citizens and it will make better informed societies are a bit over. If we just take a look at one very fresh report of the Oxford University's computational propaganda project, just a few highlights from this research. Organized social media manipulation has more doubled since 2017. In 45 democracies, politicians and political parties have used computational propaganda tools. In 26 authoritarian states, government entities have used computational propaganda. Foreign influence operations are widespread, especially over Facebook and Twitter, ran by China, India, Iran, Pakistan, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela. And in 25 countries, private companies are helping the entrepreneurs of disinformation in the political domain to make them more efficient. Also, Facebook remains the main platform for social media manipulation. So the thing is that right now the picture, what we see, the general picture is that authoritarian states are flooding their citizens with disinformation, and they project it to the democratic world. Politicians in democratic countries are also using computational propaganda to mobilize the electorate and create tribal political sets where it's easier to win elections just based on the minorities. Social media companies are providing the platform, and private companies are helping in that. And there are widespread citizen concerns as well. In the Reuters digital news report, in 38 countries, 55% of the citizens thought that on the social media they feel uncomfortable because of the huge mass of fake news, and they are misled by misinformation. So the big question, and I was the one who painted the apocalyptic picture right now. We have the speakers who will bright you up. My first question would be to set the stage, is that who are the ones in this digital age who are really owning the power? So are these the Democrats? Are these the autocrats? Are these the citizens? Are these the companies, the social media companies, the technology companies, or other kind of companies, or who really owns the power? And I would start by, let's say, going from right to left. So first, Dagnija, please, a few introductory remarks.
Okay, thank you very much. I think probably this is one of the most important questions we are raising these days. Also, in this Digital Freedom Festival I'm organizing in Latvia for 5 years already, we bring together startups, corporates, innovators, but also politicians. because we really believe that politicians also should be aware of what's happening in tech world. I remember 2 years ago we sent free invitations to 100 members of our parliament. Only 2 came. I hope that this year we will have a bigger number because we really feel that something big is happening. I just read a book by Jeremy Susskind, who was also one of the speakers last year, and he just wrote a book called The Future Politics. And what he says is that we are entering in this digital life world. Which means that actually all the systems are changing, everything is changing. So the question is, do we really are aware of what is the power structure in these new democracy systems? And I really also like to use the term reinventing democracy. And this is, I think, the status we are in now. When I'm attending tech and technology conferences all around the world, the typical answer to this question is that it's technology companies who own the power nowadays. Whether it's blockchain, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, just robotics, just name a few of them. One of the sayings we like to refer is that the one who controls artificial intelligence is the one who controls the future. On the other hand, I would say that political actors, politicians still have a great deal of power. The question is how they're using that. And I think that this equilibrium or this finding the balance between the tech and between the politicians is something that we really have to look for. We are referring a lot to the, when we talk about the future, we refer a lot to the, I don't know, this Orwellian future, surveillance state. And then the question is, do we really look at the future from perspective of the book which was written, when was it, 1942? So maybe we should, at the moment, talk what is the future we really want to make. But above all this, I think that we all understand that in a way the honeymoon is over. The honeymoon of Silicon Valley is over. And this question right now in all these tech events where young people gather and challenge who we are and what the future, what the world we want to live in the future, is a question of accountability, of responsibility, ethics, philosophy. These big topics are becoming really big ones, because we should also remember that we cannot blame tech. We should blame, it's about humans. It's about us, it's about human beings, who we are. So I think that this reinvention of democracy is a big topic, big debate, and we should be, it's urgent debate. It's not about future. Maybe we should stop talking about future. We should really talk about, it's urgent, and we should talk about right here, right now. So I think that we should also have philosophers here on this panel, because they have time to think. And not us, I guess. so I would invite more philosophers on these stages and discuss who we are as human beings, and are we ready to delegate us as human beings to robotics, to tech, because we are the only ones who are answering these questions, not the others. So this would be my setting the stage.
Thank you. John, is it true that these are the tech companies that really have the power, which is quite a widespread view these days?
Look, there's no doubt about the impact of social media on politics and governance. Just a quick story, 2 quick stories from Brussels. Last spring, we were hosting a science prize for some high school students, and the Bulgarian team of students had won, and so we invited Eva Majdal, one of the Bulgarian members of the European Parliament, a very dynamic speaker, to come present the awards to them. And then they had a little session where the students got a chance to ask her questions about how Parliament worked. And so the first question, this one kid leans in and says, "Eva, what's up with that Article 13 on the copyright directive?" You had a 16-year-old kid knowing to ask about Article 16 or Article 13, which related to fairly technical analysis of liability of platforms for copyrighted protected content. And so you could say, well, look, there was an online campaign to educate people about it, and so this 16-year-old kid from Bulgaria was actually following what was going on in the European Parliament. The other side of the story is one of the members of Parliament who was working on the legislation came to me concerned because the online campaign was targeting him personally, and he was receiving death threats. And it was done in a way that the security services couldn't evaluate. And so you had these two aspects of the online campaigning going on that were surprising. And on the one hand, very in a positive way, I think, that high school kids are following what's going on in Parliament. Another that, we have just outrageous behavior that can take place on the internet. We've always had challenges in democratic discussions, but there's an element now that's quite different, which is, if you will, the viral nature of deception. And so, at least, an American joke goes, how can you tell when a politician is lying? The answer is when their lips are moving. There's a sense of distrust of politicians there, but what's now, you don't know whose lips are really moving. And there's a difference between domestic political discourse and then foreign interference in discourse. And so we find ourselves with all of these problems trying to sort them out and deal with them. And let's face it, the technology sector has not done its job at protecting society on this. There's sincere efforts, but it's not. Nobody's going to claim it's been successful. And so, as we look forward to the future, yes, we need technology companies to take more responsibility for the technology they create and send out into the world. But going to your basic question, who owns the power? Ultimately, it's governments. Governments can regulate technology sector. Will governments exercise that power? There's difficult questions. It's going to involve actually hiring regulators to understand the underlying business and the technology. But governments have the power to do it. But the question is, will governments do it?
Thank you. I think it's a rare moment when someone who is representing a technological firm, raising the opportunity for politicians to regulate the sector. But thanks for raising the point. André, you worked at the public sector and the private sector as well. And yes, so you can have many aspects for this question, who really owns the power. So what do you think about power in the digital age?
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It has been striking in the last 2 days how many people mentioned the eruption of technology in the political discourse. The president mentioned about potentially politicians being disrupted by AI. We talked about the role of platforms and social media. It is central. But are we really taking the consequence of what is going on? And let me maybe go you to a couple of points just to illustrate that. And look at another topic which is very controversial, which is the Hong Kong issue going on. Look at how these kind of movements, leaderless, more or less, managed by social media. Look what happened in my country. I'm both French and German, so pick the side you dislike the less. But look at the Gilets jaunes. It was something that was entirely coordinated through Facebook and through live streams, etc. So it is erupting. And my first point is to say this time it's different. It's this famous American quote saying, but things repeat. And one data point that I think not everybody is aware of, the amount of data that exists in this world has become, we are probably at this tipping point where all of our cognitive capabilities, and there are only smart people, I'm sure, in this room, is overcome. The number of emails, of WhatsApps, of telegrams that we get every day, the number of information. President Trump is helping that every morning at 6 o'clock with his tweets, he's putting the whole world upside down. But when we think about it, do you know what a zettabyte is? Zettabyte is 10 factor 21. Since man is man, since Homo sapiens, until 2012, we produced 2 zettabytes. In 2015, there were 10 zettabytes, the photos, the pictures, the Netflix movies, etc. We are today estimated 30 to 35 zettabytes. And probably in the next 6 months, we will double that again. So we are, I mean, if you look at that on a chart, it's the famous exponential chart. So we are at this moment where actually we don't really understand, and the feeling, especially in Europe we have, is the feeling that actually the world is pressing things on us. The electoral system is running after every war. I mean, the European Commission is still taking on Microsoft or Google, while probably the issues of tomorrow are Instagram or the new forms of social media erupting. So first point, this time is really different. The second thing is technology is entirely political. And my worry is, and I must say on Europe there's a big difference with what I see in the US and in China. I spent 10 years of my life in China, is the understanding of that. Think about it, cybersecurity. It is our electoral systems, the fundament of our democracies, which are today at risk through cyber attacks. I mean, we saw that in the US, we saw that in France a little bit. Second thing, face recognition. Face recognition is changing, and I'm sorry I'm not a philosopher, but I'm going to quote the famous contrat social, is changing it. In China, and I'm not judging it at this stage, and not in a public manner in any case, there is no citizen and state anymore. With face recognition, you are, as a citizen, an extension of the state. I mean, think about that, how fundamental it is. It's changing the way the relationship that we thought was forever engraved and think then about things like social media. Social media is the place today that we like it or not, where political opinions are formed. I mean, there was this myth indeed with the Tahir place that it would open up, and we know. I mean, try to run a YouTube video and make it run on autopilot. You know, if you don't stop it, one video. The fact that these algorithms are still, it has been changed with the largest platform now, on engagement make that the echo chambers, the reinforcement capability, has been studied a lot with Brexit and the US election, is reinforcing itself. So, and when I hear that the only reaction of a lot of politicians is to blame it on the platforms, and I'm not defending them, to say, oh, Facebook, you need to curate your content, or Microsoft, you need to take care of the impact you have. I think we are actually delegating what is the most fundamental thing in a democracy, which is how we build public opinion, through different opinions, divergence, consensus building, elections. If we delegate that, what is that? Third, and my last point is, who is mastering that? The ones who are able to think long-term, for very bad reason, in my view, the authoritarian states. We have been, I think that was a little bit the frustration of a lot of panels. We said, okay, authoritarian states are coming up, but why? I think on the technology side, the reason is because they're able to muddle through this short-term pressure of this amount of data. They're able to think long-term. And today in this world, which is, I mean, 5 years today is probably the equivalent of 50 years of 10 years ago in fast acceleration of science, technology, geopolitical thing. So those who are able to think 5 years, 10 years, who are able to invest in infrastructure, who are able to invest in education, who are able to set goals, who have clear visions for and clear opinions for their citizen, have today a competitive advantage. And if democracies don't reinvent themselves on that particular part, I think we are, I'm sorry, I'm going to be on a very negative point, we are at risk. And think about what I mean, I'm hopeful about the new European Commission and the new European Parliament, but look at what Europe has done. On the topic of privacy, it was a little bit like the environment and sustainability topic. We probably have been ahead of the game. We understood 40 years ago that there was no plan B for the planet. Today, the Chinese are producing 99% or 98% of the solar panels and already 55% of the batteries. Privacy. We took 5 years to do GDPR. Great. I was in Washington 2 weeks ago. I arrived at Union Station, which is the big railway station. There is a 90-meter, 100-meter billboard in the big hall where Google says, I'm taking Google just to please you, John, privacy is our core concern. And don't misunderstand me. I don't think these platforms are mean or they're evil. But I think that they have understood that that is important for every single person in this room. How come the Europeans are right on the values and are not able to turn that into competitive advantage? And I heard, for example, Vice Premier Pabriks yesterday saying, how can we, and I thought that was very smart. I think the French need to engage a little bit more with Latvia on that. But how do we use these European values not just to be Fortress Europe? And today it's Fortress Future. We need to tax them. We probably need to tax you much more than we are, but that's another topic. But defense is not a strategy. There are a lot of young people in this room. Defense will never work. How can we make sure that we are on a value-based system where we build these technology platforms of tomorrow? And what is the future of AI? The future of AI is small data. Big data is...
Sorry, let me ask this question from Tuan.
Okay.
Because this question originally went to him, and you can return to it to the next round. So if it's about AI, Tuan, you elaborated the concept of AI governance to the parallel of e-governance. So who do you think are the owners of power now, and who do you think the owners of power can be if AI governance is introduced and becomes more widespread?
Yeah. Thank you so much for your invitation. And I really fall in love with Riga and Latvia, great country, and also congratulations for President Péter, CEO, great leader, and was honored as World Leader for Peace and Security Award on October 21st in Madrid. Yes, and thank you so much for your great conference. And yes, in the Boston Global Forum, we think about that opportunities and threats, challenge, and we think about how to solve that problem and how to manage challenge and threats. And we are under leadership of Governor Michael Dukakis, and we are do very much. And today, I special have official writing for conference. Riga Conference 2019. And of course, that long cannot present for some minutes, so I bring here and print version also, and soft copy, if you like, we can deliver and more detail our initiative and solution. So that is the first, that is the AI society. That is the initiative to how to shape future, how to make good society with deeply applied AI. And we have model for AI society with 7 layers. The first in chapter, the second ethics, the third, that is the technical standard, and 4 is law. Yes. Fifth, that is, and 4, and fifth, that is convention and norms and accords, international accords, something like that. And 6th level, that is for government, that is public service. And 7 layers, that is for business and individual application. That is our initiative, that the AI society, we think, we see in the future society, we should have 7 layers. We build 7 layers for very good and can manage threat and challenge from that, any layers. And also in AI society, we attract very much great brand from Harvard, MIT, Northeastern, Tufts University, contribute to build that AI government. That is one very important part, and you talk very much about that is the threat. Also, government can abuse AI, and that also recently that World Bank, MIT, EY, and Boston Global Forum, we collaborate to build not only concept, we build model for AI government. And AI government, we should think that not only government. Many people think, wow, AI government, maybe that is the AI replace for government, and AI and government can abuse and use AI for do everything. No, AI government, that is a concept to make society the better and more democracy. And also, we try to manage challenge from totalitarian system. Many people talk very terrible. Yes, threat from AI, that from people. That good people, good intellectual, that will make very good for people, for human beings. But bad government, bad political system, bad people, bad companies, make terrible and very dangerous for the world in the future. So how we can manage that? So AI government model, we try to do that. The first, that we think that model for that a national decision-making and data center. That is try to central data for technology, not for monitor, for technology to to save and to reduce cost to build, and for data, for algorithm, and we can do for many branch. But second, that is we for citizen, that a citizen can contribute, can involve, and can monitor and check and balance power. And with that, we build that is the social contract 2020 that we recently to do, because one society we need to have social contract. Social contract very good for society today already, but need to improve with data, with digital age. So new social contract, many people think we need to new social contract. But what things should include, and what is should do, and we try to make that. And also we think in new society with AI, with politics, with AI, we have 7 center of power, because we think that there's 3 branch of power and branch and check and balance the powers. But with our society now, we have 7 branch. That is in sample model at the US model. That is first, that is the executive branch. The second, legislative branch. And third, judicial branch. Fourth, business sector. That is a big corporation. That is real power branch. And for a fifth, that is the civil society organization. That is the real power and is one center of power. That is the sixth individual from you, from any people, that it bring very strong voice and directly to involve with political decision and society, everything. You show at social media. That is the sixth. And the second branch, second center, 7 is AI assistance. We will use technology assist and support us very much to make decision. That is the 7 center of power. That is in the new social contract 2020. Because the next year we will officially announce in UN for this, and we continue this gap. And I hope, why not, that all our people here contribute to make our great social contract for 21st century. And that means AI government. We deeply apply AI to help government very smart decision making and serve the people more democracy, and citizen, people can directly involve with important decision making in politics and society, and that means we citizens can directly to check and balance power of government. And also, this morning I like very much the former president of Ukraine. He talked about that is the anti-populism. So how to anti-populism, that the AI assistant system that it can help, because as a lot of information, noisy, every people can talk what's right, what's wrong, so what is incorrect, what is correct. So that means we can use that AI assistant system help and guide people can know and analyze what's a good decision and good leader, something like that. So that is I think that is the new model AI government, AI society, and the new social contract that is focused to help people and encourage and bring citizen people directly to involve and build society and manage a threat and challenge. So many people talk, very dangerous for the world in the future. But
sorry, let me interrupt you here.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I mean, I hope you will be right,
Yes.
and you're the prophet in that AI will really help us to create better democracies. Let's return to that next round. What politicians can really do with that? I would turn to Dagnija now. You have some practical experience on working in political communication. You were a communication advisor of the defense minister, if I know well, before the NATO accession. So it was a quite different time where social media was almost nowhere. It was definitely not that dominant. And what do you think the challenge official communicators face now, these days? So how do you think that, what would be your recommendation to the official communicators these days, how to overcome this huge noise that is coming through the information environment?
Yes, I was serving Minister of Foreign Affairs just right after we joined NATO. I was there for 3 years. I had to take sabbatical afterwards. So going to London was kind of my escape strategy. I think if I would have to work right now, I would have to take sabbatical maybe after half a year already because of the speed, noise, and the massive pressure of the social media in particular, what official communicators are facing nowadays. But I think that nowadays, and maybe it's not different how it used to be, but maybe the speed and the scales what makes a difference. But I think that official communicators should work, and politicians as well, to work in a 24/7 crisis regime, not only because of the social media. Of course, it plays a big role there, but also because of the global agenda. We are all interdependent already, and actually, what's happening in the New York, Washington D.C., or in Asia, you know, it just influences so much also our agenda, and we cannot sometimes really make distinctions from that. So I think that. Being politician and being an official communicator is super difficult because in general I think the publics, the citizens are I think they're angry, they are frustrated, people are afraid of the technologies because they're afraid losing jobs. They don't know whom to trust. All these political malaise or social media bubbles or we are living in, I think it really creates a big frustration. So, and when you open the news, it's doomsday every day, you know. So how to survive in this atmosphere? And of course, politicians. And the question is, politicians, can they give some hope? You know. We see at the moment the rise of political activism. Just let's take, female Me Too movements, or we see climate activism at the moment, and I think it's kind of this urgency, what the society is demanding, is ready to make recipes. It's what makes the politicians' life and political communicators' life very difficult, because there are no these recipes. So I think it's super difficult for politicians today to survive in a way and to be there. It's also because of the different style of communications politicians should imply. Infotainment, the span of attention. The span of attention is becoming so short. I'm amazed we are here in this conference having a panel discussion of 1 hour and a half. In a digital conference, it's 20 minutes. It's maximum it's maximum amount of time how you can get people's attention. So I think
we are already way beyond the attention span. Right?
Yes, already. Yeah. So I think that of course we refer a lot to let's say critical thinking as a silver bullet of the future of democracy, or how. We think that people might be critical, but I'm very skeptical towards that. Actually, we discussed just before this conference, that we don't want to be very apocalyptic, but as more as I am in this tech world, as more as I'm dealing with politicians, as more as I know how media is dealing with, I just think that people don't know how to behave in this new type of environment we are in. And I wouldn't say I'm very optimistic.
One specific question: have you had to face, as a communication consultant, any cases? I assume yes, before the NATO accession, of huge scale of misinformation that you had to react to officially.
Sure, but this was 15 years ago, so I think that we cannot really compare to that what's happening right now. As it was said here, you cannot even say whether that person is the real one, or it's or he or she is not the real one. So I think that political propaganda, political manipulation would be even bigger. And I think that it's very difficult for us already now to say what's fake, what's real. So. From that point of view, I'm not too optimistic. It's also, the question is again about responsibilities, about accountabilities. Tech companies, platforms, data, corporations, politicians. It's also very much about cooperation. And do we really see that winning this game is also about how much we can cooperate, or I would rather use the term co-compete? Because there are so many domains where we should, even the competitors, that we should cooperate. Cyber security, cyber risk, just one example.
John, you are one of the authors of a very important blog, also extensively read by experts, the EU policy blog, where there are a lot of material on electoral interference, misinformation campaigns, and how the EU institutions respond, how they do not respond, how they should respond. What would be your take on the next Commission? It's just in the making, but it seems that at least disinformation, cyber threats will belong to at least 3 portfolios. There are a lot of statements on possible policies. There are possibly some promising tendencies, such as the action plan on disinformation and so on. How much you think the EU is prepared for the technological threats coming from the social media, from artificial intelligence, cyber threats, and so on?
Well, looking around the world, Brussels is the leading regulator of the technology sector. The United States is very active, and yet, given the political dynamics in Washington, D.C., far less legislation actually comes out than what comes out in Brussels. So, and then one aspect of Brussels is that once legislation starts, it almost always succeeds. And Washington, D.C., lots of things start, but very few things succeed. And that has pluses and minuses for Europe, including some ideas that are probably, after discussion, people take reflection and say, well, maybe that's not such a great idea, but we have to still check it off our list anyways. And so some things move forward that maybe in a perfect world might not. But the other kind of limiting factor on some of European legislation is it tends to be structured towards the internal market. And that some of these problems here don't quite fit to internal market issues. They're national competence. But if we look at elections, the idea of foreign interference is not going to change. Just the nature of our connected online world, it is just so easy, and we know some people who are quite good at it, and they've had geopolitical success with it. They are going to have other people who are going to want to try to replicate their strategies. So we should assume this problem is going to get bigger. So I think Latvia, just from conversations I've had this week, you've had a long experience with many of the tactics of your neighbors. And so I think you probably have more resilience. But we need to think about legislative frameworks that especially protect election systems. And for example, campaign finance. In some member states, there's no restriction on foreign money coming in. There's no disclosure obligations. And so you've got to at least close that door if you want to prevent lawful foreign engagement in political campaigns. There's a valid and important purpose for public diplomacy, and so it is important for other. It should be entirely appropriate for the president of one country to be able to talk about their views on how public policy and democracy should work across the European Union. But that's different from running an information operation campaign that's covert and relies on viral deception. So if we start with campaign finance, we also need transparency and accountability for political advertising. We've seen proposals, and certainly in many places, the television and newspaper and radio are regulated for how advertisements work. And yet we go to the online world and it's like, never got around to it. It's new. We haven't done that yet. But we need to sort of take the principles and figure out how they can be applied to the online world so that advertising is accountable and there's transparency. There's some legislation that's been proposed in the United States called the Honest Ads Act, which would essentially extend the traditional media rules to online advertising. This is one of those problems where I don't know that Brussels can do it because of the competence. Is this internal market or is this national competence? But I think that even outside the competence, people can coordinate in activities and create that framework. So, but those are just two examples of where in the election space, we can take steps to protect the process. It's not all the problems we face come from the purely online world. I mean, the news organizations are certainly increasingly distinct in their points of view. In traditional cable television news, for example, in the United States, I would say Fox News was far more influential than the Russians in the 2016 campaign. And so, I don't want to overstate the challenges posed by the social media piece, but we need to be taking steps. We need to own up that this is the world we live in. As much as we'd like things to be different, we just can't wish away the problem. And so, on a positive note, I think it's very, from your question, you raised the question of how the new commission is choosing to be organized, and President von der Leyen is proposing to give Executive Vice President Margaret Vestager not only the competition portfolio, but the digital portfolio underneath her with a new commissioner to be named. And I think that's a very positive sign, because competition law is important, but it's not the answer to every problem. And so I think that giving the Commission, bringing those things together to look at the online or the technology sector on a continuum of where's enforcement the answer and where's regulation the answer is really a very sensible thing. And it's a big challenge, but I think that Mrs. Vestager is incredibly competent, and I'm very interested to see how she chooses to take it forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, André, let me quote you. You warned in one of your talks that Europe is losing the technology war. Its values, even democracy, are in jeopardy. And you also told that Europe remains a digital colony of American and Chinese powers. So what would you recommend, how to break out of this colonial status?
Just a quick question. Who has signed off Facebook after the Cambridge Analytica one? Congratulations, sir. No, what I want to tell you is that you can regulate whatever you want. The power of these platforms is because they are bringing products which are extremely addictive to all of us. I mean, the Apple ecosystem, the Microsoft suite, it's terrible, I'm making advertising here, is very powerful. So it's not about being against or for, it's just recognizing what's happening. And if you agree with my previous point about how these things are becoming political, let me build on one thing that you said. I agree with you. Margaret Vestager is very competent. I'm on a very dangerous ground here, but let me elaborate a little bit. It's not about what is the key success factor of this world. I mean, my very humble take on this is, one, agility. We live in this very, very fast-paced world. So GDPR might have been right 5 years ago, but please, I encourage all of you to read the reports who are coming out 1 year after it has been put in place. GDPR is putting a barrier of entry for new entrants into the data collecting world, so protecting those who hoarded this data. GDPR is making it very costly for companies. Which are the companies who cannot afford the 5 or 10 GDPR compliance people? The smaller companies, not the big ones. To add 10, 20 GDPR compliance people in a big platform is not moving the needle. So right now, are you not annoyed like myself when you go to one of these platforms that you need to de-click? Try to do that on Google. You have probably 20 buttons to de-click. We have not been able to impose one single button, remove me from everything. So today, the GDPR regulation, as you said, you're right, we are the master regulators, but are we the most effective? I'm not sure. When you have something like, you probably all know DeepMind. DeepMind was this famous UK company that developed AlphaGo and then AlphaGo Zero, who beat the famous Go player. When DeepMind was bought in 2014 for $500 or $600 million by Google, at that time there's more or less a consensus in the community that 20% of the best AI minds in Europe were in DeepMind. So when Google bought them, my claim is they killed competition much more than any kind of Siemens Alstom deal. If we are not able to update our competition laws, I mean, market share is something of the 20th century. It does not mean anything anymore. Today, the competition will be increasingly about who is able to attract the best minds. Do you know another topic? At Facebook's AI division in Menlo Park, a third of the 150 people are French people. 17 are Germans, and I'm sure there are a lot of Baltics and Latvians and others working in these companies. And when you ask these young talent why they are there, it's a bit the money, but it's the freedom, but also the big expectation. There's this change the world, which the French always see very cynically, but that's what this new generation wants to do. They want in 20 minutes to get their points through. This is And my call to Ms. von der Leyen, I hear so many, right now the Commission is bringing out these papers. It's not a revolution, it's an evolution. No, Ms. von der Leyen, you need to, sorry to quote a famous US president, you need to tear down this wall of slowness, and we need in Europe to be much more agile. We need, and it's not about just regulating Microsoft will not solve it. We need to bring this capacity of experimentation, and that makes me worry about China. And just to finish on China, people have this impression that China is this monolith, everything is decided in Beijing. All of you who have been in China, you know, it's the ultimate place for experimentation. Shenzhen was an experiment. It was a special economic zone, 200,000 people 30 years ago. Now it's the central place where all the hardware, most of the hardware of the world is produced. And there had been hundreds of experiments who did not work, so they chopped their heads physically, literally and figuratively. I mean, but you know, and we democracies, we need to experiment that. Where do we experiment new ways? When I heard a little bit in the room when there was talk, this experiment about Eupen and the lottery, well, I'm optimistic because I think these tools are a way to empower people. The way En Marche did its campaign was a lot on social media. The problem we have a little bit, and please, we are among friends, so please don't tell that in Paris, is that the day we had the government in place, we went back to the traditional, relatively vertical way of exerting power, which I think is the 20th century. We need, it's not easy, but I think these digital tools are not the only solution, but it's a way to have this breathing and this permanent influx and empowerment. And I think people want to be empowered, and I think we need to give them the means. And I hope the European Parliament, especially, will take that and focus on this as a priority. But please accelerate. 5 years to have a European law. You might be right, but you are wrong when you are with a product. So that's my call for speed.
Tuan, one question to you. It's like there is this widespread fear about artificial intelligence. Probably this is a fear that many in the room share, that artificial intelligence can take away not only the blue-collar jobs, as it happened so far with the automation in the industrial sector, but also the white-collar jobs. Probably politicians shouldn't be afraid because, yeah, nobody wants to elect an algorithm. But the ones who, analysts, for example, and the ones who are dealing with data, there are predictions that saying that artificial intelligence can simply take away of their jobs, also of doctors and so on. So what do you think, how do you think it can be avoided that there is an increase of unemployment as a result of technological advancement? And how do you think decision makers should prepare for that and tackle that challenge?
Yeah, thank you for the interesting question. I think we are very optimistic. We don't worry about that because we closed many shops, we open new door, many new opportunities open for us to new shop. Very simple example. Some years ago, I have some assistants, a group assistants. So one assistant assist for me, schedule, logistics, and admin, something like that. Now we don't need that. So that means she will lose the job. But she have another opportunity to do what thing? That is develop content. That we have also assist for me. There are a lot of picture, writing, and event. So how to develop, to make that new content from our event, our work. So she worked very good and became better, smarter than older work. So I think that is a very simple example I observed and many another. So you think printing, that is that you in the online and soft copy, we don't need print so much, but you print more, paper print more. You think online and internet connection, we don't need travel too much, but we travel more. That is That is the example. So I very optimistic, and also not only thinking, we build and create AI society innovation network. In that, we create new opportunities, show the people, and give opportunity for many young people, and people can change, can find out the share. That is because the share economy with AI. AI make our more opportunities in share economy from any country. China grow, that is the share economy grow very fast, and they catch up that opportunity. Latvian people here, you can do for global with AI, with share economy. That is a very good opportunity for many countries, many people. So we need educate, re-educate, rethinking, and also we have new model for AI education. We don't need to teach too much. Why not? Why we have to spend a lot of time to teach a lot of knowledge? We can easy to find. We easy to find our knowledge. So we need to support and help innovation, innovative people. So that means I answer your question that we have a lot of new opportunity, better, and also you reduce the time came to office. You can work in your house together with your family, and yes, in person, face to face. Should think about friendship, about neighborhoods. Don't focus too much about mobile. That is, the AI can help us reduce the time to work in office, reduce the traffic jam in the highway and road, and we more effective. That is my answer. So, sure, so we can try. And please, together with us to do that is the AI Society Innovation Network. You will see a lot of new opportunity.
Thank you. One question to the panel, feel free to pick it up. One target group we haven't really addressed are the companies. So it's not only the political players that are exposed to the negative impacts of disinformation, artificial intelligence, both trolls and so on, but increasingly companies as well. And given that many of you are deeply embedded in the corporate world. So what would be your suggestions to corporate leaders, how to prepare, let's say, for the disinformation challenge, to the cyber threat challenge, and possibly to an era where it will be not only political competitors that use, let's say, the dirty technological tools against each other, but probably companies as well?
Can I?
Yeah, John?
Abby, start. The United States has had an unusual political experiment going on for 3 years now, where we have a president setting the agenda every morning at 6 a.m. with his tweets. And one of the concerns from the corporate world is, we don't want to get a negative tweet. And it's a generational kind of concern, talking to my son and his friends about it. They say, well, it's entertainment, it's not, And I think you can go back and look demonstrably, those tweets don't really have a lot of impact on corporations. But it's an unusual experiment. We'll see how it evolves. But what in terms of how to deal with the ongoing world, I fully agree, André, that we need regulatory schemes that work better, that are more responsive. And I think, companies need to engage more, and not just in company to company, but in multi-stakeholder discussions with government and others, and civil society. And so going to an area where I think the European Commission has done a very good job without regulation is dealing with terrorist content. And the first, on Monday, I was in Luxembourg for the 5th EU Internet Forum, where we talked about terrorist content, far-right, hate speech, and some other issues. But the progress over the last 4 years of having the dialogue about how can government and the private sector work together to address these issues, I think has really been tremendous. And so last March was the attack at Christ Church, where 51 people were killed in their houses of worship by a gunman who was live streaming the attack. And the New Zealand government and Prime Minister Ardern led an effort to do something about it. President Macron was very sympathetic, as were we and other companies. We came together and we announced the Christchurch call, which was, how do we deal with extremist violence? Now, that was 7 months ago. Over the course of the summer, the companies and governments sat down and came up with protocols for when one of these content issues arise, where there's something live streamed. In Christchurch, there were 200 people watching the attack online, and they didn't report it. And it was posted more than 125,000 times in 800 variations in the next day. There was a concerted effort to distribute this violent content. And so how can we all respond? And so on Monday, I reported the progress we made on we call the content incident protocol among the companies for how we would deal with this content. We've had 18 fire drills, and I wish we only had to do fire drills, but this week, with the attack at Halle, Germany, on Yom Kippur, it was the first time we implemented the protocol. And we were very successful at keeping the live-streamed content from being reposted and distributed. And because industry and government had worked together, in a very short time, we came up with a solution, or at least an approach, to minimize the harm from a very terrible act. And so, on a positive note, multi-stakeholder actions, we can work together and we can make progress.
Maybe to build on one of the topics that, what the initiative that we are working on, which is basically to create a European version of DARPA, but in a civilian aspect. That means push the technology frontiers, not always run after the Chinese or the Americans, but creating the future and push technology. One of the topics that we are focused on is the whole topic of deep fakes. I don't know if people know, it's a compression of deep learning and fake news. And if you think that fake news has a huge impact on the public discourse and on media companies and on individual reputations, imagine the same in videos who are entirely built by a specific part of artificial intelligence, which is called generative adversarial networks. And today there is no way, when it's well done, to distinguish a false from a right video. So imagine, so today you probably all saw the video of Obama. You probably saw the one on Mark Zuckerberg, where he was quoted saying, "We will own. We don't really care. We will own the data. We will own the world." A lot of pornographic, obviously, content. But imagine tomorrow there is a fake video of the CEO of a large bank in Latvia, who is talking to one of his colleagues and saying, "I'm not so sure about the solvency of my bank." The next day, you have a real-world bank run. If you have a luxury company in France or somewhere else, where one of their models is saying, well, actually, all these clothes have animal content, the next day you have millions, if not hundreds of millions of market capitalization, which is destroyed. So the way tomorrow you will want to destabilize not just politicians, but and we are very worried about the next election because it's completely linked to computing power, and now you begin to have that. So this is a way, the question was, how can the Europeans go? I think the privacy topic is a boulevard for European unicorns to emerge in AI. The deepfake topic is probably a boulevard for the Europeans to say, we are not just doing technology for technology, but we're using technology for societal goods. And the one thing I'm a little bit against is when we talk about AI strategies, because I slightly disagree. I think that it's very interesting for the people in the room to talk about AI is exciting, but for a bank employee or for the Uber driver, he knows he will be replaced by a combination between Uber and Waze. I mean, he has no job in 5 years anymore. And so we need to make understanding the general public that actually technology is not just against, but can serve greater goods. And that's why I think also the response of the political leadership on environmental topics have been a little bit poor so far, because this is a real demand where you have hard problems to solve, and those who are solving that are your most important investor is Bill Gates with his breakthrough energy venture. But how come we are not putting more efforts in that? And look at what the Europeans are doing. I'm sorry, I'm going to be a little bit critical. I'm genetically European, but when I see that the Europeans are trying to build a lithium-ion battery, this is the technology of today. And in 5 years, we will build a factory which is 1/5 or 1/3 of the mega factory. We will be one generation later. What's the next big thing? What's quantum computing? Who is leading in quantum? The Chinese. Who is leading in space exploration is Jeff Bezos, who is putting billions into it, and the Europeans have this dream of doing themselves the reusable rocket. That's the war of today. So my point is to say we can, and we probably need more philosophers among politicians that give a vision of what we are for. And I don't see that vision. And I hope von der Leyen will give this vision that Europe is for technology, for privacy, is how does Europe not just do a carbon tax, but how do we create a new sustainable economy? For the moment, I must agree with some of the demonstrators on Fridays, there's a little bit of talk.
Okay, thank you. Very briefly.
Very briefly, yeah, I totally agree with previous speakers, and I really believe that actually the biggest threat is not being innovative. And what I see, for example, here in Latvia, and just another day last week, I received a call from one of the state-owned companies, and he called me and asked, where we should start, and how can we do it, because they understand it's not about. Actually, they understand it's not only about how, it's also about why. And still in many big corporations I'm working with, I feel that there's this why we should innovate, why we should be innovative companies. They still kind of don't understand, because it also demands totally different mindset. It demands being open, it demands being working in the environment which is based on the trial-error approach. It demands transparency, it demands accepting the failures, etc., etc. So I think this is the biggest threat. The other biggest threat, I think, it's not only from the cooperations point of view, but maybe more from the bigger picture. I think it's about European competitiveness globally, and it was raised already here. For example, when I look at the startup scene, the VC money, most of the VC money is not going to the European startup companies. Actually, only a small minority, even from European VCs, is going outside European borders. So it's also the signal that investors with their money signals that this is a good market to innovate. And the last but not the least, I think very interesting idea which I got in just last month. I was in Copenhagen in Tech Festival. There was discussion about that we should become more human-centric. And this human-centricism in this tech world, actually it could be the brand name of Europe in a way, Maybe it sounds maybe kind of, I don't know, we're returning to this kind of old, we would be perceived as ancient Greece in the future, the place or citadel of values, of transparency, of privacy, of respecting people's dignity. But maybe it could also be the brand name for the Europe in the future. I don't know, is it a competitive advantage? But this is something that makes me think.
Yes, I want one sentence more of that for him. I agree that is not so. We don't talk the full optimistic for new job, but we need to education and smart education And the second, that is for that we need to respect, protect common values, standard value of our country, that is at least a G7 and OECD country. That is a very important value. We need to protect and respect them. But any country in the world cannot, any country that explain that is our different culture, we cannot respect. I don't think so. That in reality, any country respect that common value, standard value, grow very fast and very good country. Yes.
Thank you. So let me open the door for questions. I see a lot of hands, so please introduce yourself, ask a question, not just raise a lengthy comment, and please tell who would you like to address with your question. So, gentlemen here first. We would collect 3 and then go back to the panel.
Thank you for the panel. I'm Kirill Solovyov, IT security expert. I apologize if my question is 5 years early. 2 of the speakers touched on the difficulty of separating human versus artificial actors online. Do you think it's important to be able to distinguish between the 2 based on who they are rather than what they do, why? And is it fair and ethical to do so?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, a lady there on the left. Right. Okay. You please with the blue, blue shirt.
Anastasia Chmykhala, Ukrainian student. My specialty, international law. And that's why your answer for the next question is so important for me. So what about the human rights in an increasingly digital world? Actually, the digital space is not a neutral space. The protection of human rights in a digital era is challenging in all regime types, democracies and autocracies alike. So, and on your points of view, what challenges and opportunities do technology pose for human rights defenders, and how can we protect our human rights online in such digital age? Thank you.
Thank you. Someone in the back. Okay, the gentleman there.
Thank you. My name is Maximilian Kretschmann. I'm a law student from Munich, Germany. So, the European Union is currently the global leader when it comes to data protection. And while this is an honorable value, don't our companies and startups need this business market to fuel further innovation, also in the field of cybersecurity as well as other future innovations? By regulating ourselves too much, are we putting ourselves at a competitive disadvantage, especially against rising technological powers like China? And I would like to direct this question to Mr. Frank. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So, John, do you want to start?
Sure. I think that the most important question is what kind of society do we want to live in? And so I think that privacy values are incredibly important. Now, I also take the point, GDPR is not perfect, it's not biblical, and we probably need to find ways to adjust things. And so, you know, we've been advocating that the e-privacy regulation that's proposed is a problem because it affects too much data in an inefficient way. But you know, it is important to embrace values first and then figure out what's the smart way to move forward. Is this a disadvantage to China? I mean, most AI applications that we work with for European companies, it's not personal data, right? It's industrial data. It's Internet of Things, factories that are the core of ensuring that European enterprises remain world-class competitive by adopting more technology and infusing it with their domain expertise, whether it's manufacturing stainless steel or creating smart buildings. You know, European enterprises know these things well. They need to bring in the additional tools. We need more people who have data science to get that done. Those are far more important to the competitiveness of Europe than I think the privacy challenge.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to pick up the question on does it matter if it's human or not?
No, I can answer a question for her. That is about how to protect and do.
Okay.
Yep. I think Yes, come back with AI with society, social contract. We think the most important, we have to, every country and every people and civil society organization respect and do for that is check and balance government and companies and how that the AI system can help. Government can abuse the AI, can do bad things, but also people, our individual, can use the AI system assistance to do the monitor, balance, and check power of government and corporation. Some corporations, they have dictatorship in data and bad things, something like that we can do. And we have AI society, young leaders, that is for thinkers and doers, not only think and do. The young people can join and we together to raise voice and we can try to use a tool and technology with app assisted by AI to monitor and to balance power. So I think that is the solution for you.
Dagnija?
Yeah, some reflections of this merge of humans and robots or AI. I myself am a big fan of Singularity University, and they predict that humans will merge with this technology maybe some 10, 15, 20 years time. And what does it mean in practical terms? It's difficult to say. But the latest book by Naval Harari, he says actually the biggest challenge is about the biotech and AI technologies, meaning that at some point, we will have these superhumans who, with the help of biotechnologies and artificial intelligence, actually it could be some third race. So this is one thing what he says. But I think that the beauty of humans, the beauty of humanity, it's in its imperfection. And when we talk about robotics, AI, it's about efficiency, about being perfect. It's about not having mistakes. So I don't think that this is something that we really want to approach to. Already now we are delegating so many everyday's, let's say, beauty of being humans. Let's just take Tinder as an example. We are delegating our relationship setting momentum to technology. And people say, and the startups who are developing Tinder-type applications where you can put all your data and you would see, does that person fit you as a future husband, lover, or a pal for coffee or not. But I think it's very dangerous in a way, because it will not give us this opportunity of creativity, exploring, trying, pain, happiness. Because you can experience happiness only if you experience pain as well. So I think that it would be a very dangerous future. So I would say that the humanity, the human being in its imperfection, is something that we should cherish and praise.
Okay, a final round of questions, gentleman there.
Thank you, Commander England, Belgian Defense Staff. I would like to build on a question asked by a young student here about regulation and control, because on one hand we heard that Europe is a digital colony of the US and China and that we need to beef up our competitiveness in AI. And on the other hand, we count on the European Union to do the regulation work and to regulate the use of artificial intelligence. But maybe we're doing the things in the wrong order, because I've been in the two last EU Council meetings where we were supposed to discuss investment in AI and increasing the competitiveness of European companies. And we ended up front discussing more what regulation we should have to prevent the use of AI in autonomous lethal weapon systems. So we were putting already a regulation limitation to what we should do before spending the first euro in research and development. So I want to come back to the question of regulation. By over-regulating, are we not killing our own competitiveness in AI for Europe? Thank you.
Serious question. Thank you. So, what would gentleman here?
Thank you. Klaus Wittmann, Aspen Institute, Germany, and University of Potsdam. I would like to address myself to our French-German friend who earlier this year contributed very well to our Aspen AI conference. But I want to make pose a personal question. I find it mind-boggling what else I should follow, and this, and be more agile, and increase the speed. I cannot handle the 100 or so emails which I get every day, and my wife refuses to be my secretary. And then all, the websites. I sometimes console myself with what a very wise German politician, Dagmar Schipanski, once said: the information flood produces a knowledge desert. And I would like to hear what you say to that.
Okay, thank you.
Wisdom.
Okay. So then, André?
First, since we're interactive, I saw somebody, I said that the Chinese are leading in quantum communication. Not luckily all in quantum, but the first data link was done by Chinese, by the way, also through an Austrian professor financed by the European Union. So see where there's a little bit of a problem here. On the regulation aspect, look at what's going on since 2 years. AI today is about big data. You need it to train supervised or unsupervised machines. And therefore, the whole topic about the power of the platforms who have this capacity to attract and hoard this amount of data. First, I think there's a way out of it. Is my 18 months or 16 months kid does not need 1 million pictures of cats to recognize a cat. So the future of AI will be small data. Probably something very compatible with European values. Are we putting big money, big efforts in Europe like that in that? No. Second thing, we say it's about big data. We say that our asset, I heard that yesterday, is our single market. The French have their strategy. The Germans have their strategy. I'm German, I'm going to allow to be a little bit critical to my country. They even call it KI, made in Germany. I mean, don't you see the stupidity of the word itself? I mean, you restrict it to national borders. They could have added for German jobs. The Belgians have launched their strategy 9 months ago. It's like, I'm actually not really French, I'm Corsican. It's like if the Corsica was developing its AI strategy. What will we see in 2 years? We will see a fragmentation, because what means national strategies means national set of regulation. The priorities in France are not the same as the Germans. And in 2 years we will say, oh, we don't have AI unicorns. And the debate right now at the parliament is only about putting more money. It makes no sense. You can throw as much money as you want. If there's not, and I was formerly a venture capitalist, the downside, as we say, that means losing all your money, is the same in China, in the US, and in Europe. But the upside, when you make it big in China and US, is huge. The upside, you can make a big Latvian company. You can make a big French company. It's not the same. So, of course, there's less money. So the one thing that von der Leyen needs to do in the next 3 months, not 3 years, is a real single digital market. By the way, for all the people who are in military in this room, same thing with cyber. You know what we all lost? You know who has capacity of attributing cyber attacks today? The US and Russia. We don't know in most of the attacks who really attacks you, in the most sophisticated ones. And when you don't know who attacks you, you lose your sovereignty because you cannot strike back. And now, the BSI and ANSI are not working together. They are not really doing that. That is political will. You have these little power things, which I can, from a political point of view, completely understand. It's very classy for a chancellor or for a president to announce an AI strategy. But at the end of the day, we will all whine, because at the end of the day, it's smart companies like the one which is on my left who will reap the benefit of it. And on your question about AI, but that's my dream. That's exactly what I was saying, is we are in this world where I think complexity is taking out what the French call le libre arbitre. It's an illusion to think that democracies today are functioning. Because if we don't understand what's going on, imagine the general public. And maybe on that one, AI is a way, I mean, for those who are flying, or you probably saw all these Top Gun movies, you know that right now, increasingly, in this very fast-paced environment, but in high-speed train is the same, you have a fraction of the information which is displayed. You have some cars which now are, on your screen. So AI is selecting the key information you need to know. I mean, for those of you who have big teams, that's what your advisors are supposed to give you, is really the critical long-term trends or the important emergencies. And my dream is that AI might be actually a way to empower the individual to understand what's really going on and take away the noise. Is what people call that portable AI, etc. Because right now, who is giving you your choices to buy? Is Amazon, and you have probably all used Amazon before. It's so powerful because they almost, I mean, they kind of show you what you probably only were thinking of buying because they understand your buying habits. The problem is the power you delegated to Amazon. What we need is with AI to bring it back, and that would be a wonderful European project, is to say we need to develop portable AI that everybody can own, and then you solve, by the way, also the portability issue of data. Of course, okay, it's a dream.
On this happy note, we unfortunately running out of our time, so thanks a lot for your patience. Few summarizing remarks. We need more philosophers. We need more ethical technology and more human-centric. We need a more strong European response and a single digital market. Also, regulators should live up with their rights and competences and power to regulate. Artificial intelligence can be used for good as well, and politicians shouldn't be afraid of using it, but at the same time we should probably think about over-regulation as well as a danger for competitiveness. So thank you very much for all of you. A big applause to our panel, and a big applause to you as well that you stayed awake. Thank you.